Let's start with what most people overlook, the shift. Not something loud or obvious, not something you can immediately point at and say, that's the reason. It's subtle. It's in the energy, the presence, the way he carries himself around you. Because when a man has just been involved with someone else, something inside him changes. And no matter how hard he tries to act normal, that shift has a way of showing up. You might notice he's suddenly quieter than usual. Conversations that once flowed easily now feel forced or short. He gives you less eye contact, less engagement, like his mind is somewhere else. And when you ask what's wrong, the answer is always simple. Nothing. But that nothing doesn't match what you're feeling. Because this isn't about words, it's about alignment. And when someone's actions don't align with their usual behavior, that's where the signal begins. Sometimes the shift goes in the opposite direction. Instead of becoming distant, he becomes unusually energetic, almost too light, too relaxed, like he's trying to overcompensate for something. He laughs a little louder, talks a little faster, acts like everything is perfectly fine, but it feels off. Not because positivity is wrong, but because it doesn't match his normal state. It feels like a performance rather than a natural expression. And that's the key, a natural change. Because people are patterns. We all have a rhythm in how we speak, how we respond, how we connect. And when that rhythm suddenly breaks without a clear reason, it's not random, something caused it. Something shifted internally, and now it's leaking externally in small, almost unnoticeable ways. What makes this so confusing is that there's no clear evidence. Nothing you can hold on to, nothing you can prove. Just a feeling that something is different. And that's where most people start doubting themselves. They think, maybe I'm overthinking, or maybe I'm just being insecure. But awareness is not insecurity. Recognizing a change in behavior is not overreacting. It's observing reality. Because if someone is emotionally and mentally consistent, you don't feel this kind of sudden disconnect. You don't feel like you're trying to catch up to a version of them that was just there yesterday. Consistency creates comfort, but inconsistency creates questions. The shift doesn't need to be extreme to be real. It's in the small things. The way he responds slower than usual. The way his tone feels slightly different. The way his attention seems divided even when he's right in front of you. These are not coincidences. They're indicators. The mistake most people make is waiting for something obvious before they trust what they feel. But by the time something obvious appears, the pattern has already been there. And the moment you start paying attention to sudden, unexplained changes is the moment you stop ignoring what's right in front of you. Now here's where it gets even more confusing, because not every sign looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like the exact opposite. Instead of pulling away, he suddenly starts leaning in more than usual. More compliments, more attention, more unexpected kindness. And at first it feels good. It feels like maybe things are improving, like maybe he's realizing your value. But when you slow down and really observe it, something about it feels different. Almost like it's coming from a place that isn't fully genuine. Because when someone is dealing with internal guilt, their natural response is not always to withdraw. Sometimes it's to overcompensate. You'll notice things that weren't there before. He starts praising you more than usual, saying things that feel slightly exaggerated. He becomes unusually affectionate at random moments, almost like he's trying to prove something. He might bring you gifts, offer extra help, or suddenly show interest in areas he previously ignored. And while none of these actions are negative on their own, the timing and intensity matter, because real affection is consistent. It grows naturally over time and feels stable. But guilt-driven behavior feels rushed, uneven, and sometimes even misplaced. It's not about building something deeper. It's about covering something up internally. And here's what most people miss. This kind of attention is not about you. It's about how he feels about himself. When someone knows they've done something wrong, there's a psychological need to balance that feeling, to ease the discomfort, to quiet the conscience. And one way to do that is by being extra good in other areas. It creates a temporary sense of relief, like they're making up for what happened without actually addressing it. But the problem is, this kind of behavior doesn't last, because it's not rooted in truth, it's rooted in reaction. And reactions fade. You might notice that the extra attention comes in bursts, strong one moment, then gone the next. One day he's fully present, the next he's back to being distant or distracted. That inconsistency is the giveaway. It creates a cycle that keeps you confused. You start focusing on the good moments, holding on to them as proof that everything is okay. You tell yourself, see, he cares, or maybe I was just overthinking. But what you're really experiencing is a fluctuation driven by something deeper than the surface actions. And this is where awareness becomes important, because not all positive behavior is genuine in its intention. Sometimes it's a mask. Sometimes it's a way to avoid facing the real issue. And if you only look at what he's doing without questioning why it suddenly changed, you miss the truth behind it. Because genuine connection doesn't need to be forced or intensified out of nowhere. It stays steady. And the moment you start questioning sudden, inconsistent kindness is the moment you begin to see what's really driving it. Then there's the shift you can feel even when nothing is being said, the disconnect in presence. Because being physically there doesn't mean someone is truly with you. And when a man is hiding something, especially after being involved with someone else, one of the hardest things for him to maintain is natural, effortless connection. It starts to show in the way he looks at you, or avoids looking at you altogether. Eye contact is one of the most honest forms of communication. It doesn't require words, and it's difficult to fake for long. When someone is clear, when their actions and intentions are aligned, there's no tension in how they engage with you. Their gaze is steady, their attention is focused, and their presence feels real. But when something is off internally, that alignment breaks, and suddenly what used to feel natural begins to feel forced. You might notice he looks away more often during conversations. Not in a casual, relaxed way, but in a way that feels like he's trying to avoid being fully seen. His eyes might wander, his focus might drift, or he may seem distracted even when you're talking about something important. It's subtle, but it creates a sense of distance that wasn't there before. And it's not just about eye contact. It's about emotional availability. Because when someone is carrying guilt or hiding something, their energy becomes divided. Part of them is present, but another part is occupied somewhere else. Mentally, emotionally, sometimes even defensively. And that division shows up in how they respond to you. Conversations may feel shorter, less meaningful. He might give surface-level answers instead of engaging deeply like he used to. Topics that once brought connection now feel flat or rushed. It's like you're talking to the same person, but the depth is missing. And that's because authenticity requires openness. And openness is hard to maintain when there's something to hide. Sometimes instead of avoiding, he might try too hard. Over-focusing, over-listening, almost like he's forcing himself to appear present. But even that has a different energy. It doesn't flow naturally. It feels controlled, measured, like every reaction is being monitored. Because when someone is not fully at ease within themselves, they can't fully relax into the moment with you. And here's what makes this so important. Real connection doesn't create tension. It doesn't make you feel like you're trying to pull someone back into the moment. It doesn't leave you questioning whether they're really there with you. Presence is something you feel without effort when it's genuine. So when that presence starts to fade, when eye contact feels inconsistent, when emotional depth starts to disappear, it's not something to ignore. It's a signal, a quiet but powerful indication that something internally has shifted, and now it's showing externally. And the moment you start paying attention to how someone shows up, not just what they say, is the moment you begin to understand what's really going on. Then there's the shift that shows up in what he suddenly starts protecting. Not in a loud, obvious way, but in small changes that feel out of place. Because when someone has something to hide, their focus quietly moves from being open to being careful. And that carefulness often centers around one thing: their phone and their routine, You might notice he becomes more attached to his phone than usual. Not just using it more, but guarding it differently. Turning the screen away when messages come in, lowering the brightness, keeping it face down more often, taking it with him everywhere, even in moments where he never used to before. These aren't dramatic actions on their own, but when they appear suddenly, they mean something has changed. It's not about the device. It's about control, because when there's information that could expose something, the instinct is to manage access to it. He may start locking his phone more frequently, changing passwords, or becoming tense if you're anywhere near it. Even casual situations, like you picking it up to check the time, might trigger a reaction that feels bigger than the moment. That reaction isn't about privacy alone. It's about fear of something being seen. And it doesn't stop there. The same pattern starts to appear in his routine. He may begin stepping away to take calls, choosing quieter spaces, or saying, "I'll call you back," more often than before. His schedule might start having small gaps that don't quite make sense. Times when he's unavailable without a clear explanation, or moments where his story feels rushed or incomplete. Again, none of these things prove anything on their own, but together, they create a pattern of avoidance and control. What's important here is the shift from openness to restriction, because when someone has nothing to hide, their behavior is naturally relaxed. They don't feel the need to monitor every movement or manage every detail. Their routine flows without tension. But when there's something behind the scenes, even simple actions start carrying weight. And here's where many people get confused. They start questioning themselves instead of the pattern. They think, maybe I'm invading privacy, or maybe I'm reading too much into it. But there's a difference between respecting privacy and ignoring secrecy. Privacy is consistent. It's a personal boundary that exists regardless of the situation. But secrecy appears suddenly, and it comes with defensiveness. You're not reacting to the phone, you're reacting to the change. Because consistency builds trust, but sudden shifts in behavior create doubt. And when someone becomes more focused on hiding than connecting, that tells you where their priorities have shifted. So instead of focusing on individual actions, look at the overall pattern. Look at what's being protected, what's being avoided, and how things have changed from what they used to be. And the moment you notice someone becoming more guarded than open is the moment you start seeing what they don't want you to see. Then there's the part that doesn't come from what you see. It comes from what doesn't add up. Because when someone is trying to manage two realities at the same time, the hardest thing to keep consistent is the story. Not the big picture, but the small details, the timing, the sequence, the little pieces that should naturally connect but somehow don't. At first, it's easy to miss. A slight difference in how he explains something. A detail that changes when the story is told again. Maybe it's something simple, where he was, who he was with, what time something happened, nothing major on its own. But over time, those small inconsistencies start to stack up. And when they do, they create a quiet tension between what you're being told and what actually feels true, because truth is effortless to remember. It doesn't need to be adjusted, corrected, or reworded. But when someone is not being fully honest, they have to keep track of what they've said before. And that's where things begin to slip. A timeline doesn't match. A reason feels incomplete. An explanation sounds rehearsed rather than natural. You might notice moments where he hesitates before answering a simple question, or gives an answer that feels slightly off, like it's missing something. Sometimes he might over-explain, adding unnecessary details to make the story sound more believable. Other times he keeps it too short, hoping not to reveal too much. And that imbalance between too much and too little is where the inconsistency lives. What makes this difficult is that each individual moment can be explained away. You might think, maybe he just forgot, or maybe I misunderstood. And that's exactly why it continues, because doubt doesn't come from one clear contradiction. It comes from repeated misalignment, from a pattern of things not quite fitting together. And here's the deeper truth. When someone is living honestly, Their words and their reality move in the same direction. There's no need to adjust or protect the narrative. But when someone is dividing their time, their attention, and their truth, they're constantly managing information, deciding what to say, what to leave out, and how to make it all sound consistent. That mental effort shows. It shows in the pauses, in the corrections, in the way conversations sometimes feel slightly unnatural. And even if you can't point to one specific moment and say, that's the lie, you can feel that something isn't fully aligned because your mind picks up on patterns before your logic fully understands them. It notices when things don't match, when energy doesn't align with words, when explanations don't sit right. And that awareness is not something to ignore. It's something to observe more closely. So instead of focusing on proving one moment wrong, start looking at the overall pattern. Look at how often things don't quite connect, how often details shift, how often you're left trying to piece things together on your own. And the moment you stop ignoring inconsistencies is the moment the truth starts revealing itself. And after everything you've noticed, the shifts, the inconsistencies, the guarded behavior, the things that don't quite add up, there's one signal that ties it all together, and it doesn't come from him. It comes from you. It's that quiet feeling that something isn't right, even when you can't fully explain why. It's the moment you pause and think, this doesn't feel the same, or something is off, even when everything on the surface looks normal. Most people try to ignore that feeling. They push it down, explain it away, or label it as overthinking. They tell themselves they need proof, something clear and undeniable before they trust what they feel. But intuition doesn't work that way. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It picks up on patterns, energy, behavior shifts, and small details long before your mind can organize them into logic, because your mind processes information in layers. Consciously, you hear the words, you see the actions. But subconsciously, you're noticing everything else. The tone, the timing, the pauses, the changes in rhythm. And when all of those subtle signals don't align, your intuition reacts. Not with a clear explanation, but with a feeling. That feeling isn't random. It's built from everything you've already observed, even if you haven't fully connected the dots yet. The problem is we've been conditioned to trust logic over instinct. To believe that if we can't prove something, we shouldn't question it. So we stay in situations longer than we should, waiting for something obvious to confirm what we already feel deep down. But by the time that confirmation comes, the pattern has already repeated itself multiple times. And here's the truth. Your intuition is not there to confuse you. It's there to protect you. It's the internal signal that says, pay attention. Not necessarily to jump to conclusions, but to stop ignoring what doesn't feel right. Because when something is genuine, when someone is aligned in their actions and intentions, you don't feel this kind of ongoing doubt. You don't feel like you have to constantly analyze, question, or second guess. Peace is consistent. Clarity is calm. But when something is off, it creates noise in your mind. It keeps you thinking, replaying conversations, trying to understand what changed. And that mental noise is not something to normalize. It's something to examine. Because the longer you ignore your intuition, the easier it becomes to disconnect from it. You start relying only on what you're told instead of what you're experiencing. And that's when you lose your ability to see things clearly. But when you start listening to that inner voice, when you start taking those subtle feelings seriously, everything begins to make more sense. The patterns become clearer. The behavior becomes easier to understand. And the confusion starts to fade. You don't need to have every answer to trust what you feel. You just need to stop dismissing it. And the moment you start trusting your intuition is the moment you stop ignoring the truth.